Hi, I'm Dawn of Dawn's Dirt. I am a former farmer, a mother of three, and an advocate of agriculture. And I am here today on my first ever podcast to tell you my story and my history and my background. And so here we go. I was born in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I was born to two lovely parents, right in the inner city. And when I was about 5 years old, my parents decided to leave the city and move to west of Airdrie, Alberta, Canada, and buy their very first greenhouse. The very first greenhouse they had was actually they were in a partnership with someone. And we won't get into that part of it, but yeah, they were in a partnership. They bought about a $10,000 square foot greenhouse, and they grew long English cucumbers, and they brought them to a warehouse. Now, one of my earliest memories is actually working on that farm. No, I wasn't working. I was too young. We were about 5 at the time, but yeah. We would be in the greenhouse and we'd be trying to help, but we weren't very helpful. And my mom we had this old station wagon, and back in the 80s, there was no seatbelt laws. And so my mom would put these boxes, these dozen cucumbers in the back of the station wagon, and then she'd bring them to the warehouse. And sometimes us kids, we wouldn't fit. There was 3 or 4 of us at the time. I can't even remember how many of us there were. And we would be like on top of the boxes or underneath the boxes, or we'd crawl in and make a little hole beside the boxes. And yeah, those were some fun times. I can also remember the people that my parents were in a partnership with, they had big gardens. And one time I was in the garden and I was helping weed. And yeah, I was pulling all the dill out and throwing it away. And I got yelled at and, fun times. That was one of my early childhood memories of, being in a garden and being in a greenhouse. So vegetables have been a part of my life even since I was small. When I was in grade 1, I actually wrote a book, a little short story for grade 1 for my teacher called Dawn's Greenhouse. So that's the thing. Who writes about their career at age 5 or 6 or 7 or however old I was? Who writes about their career and it comes to fruition and it comes to truth? That's me. That's who I was. And that's the start and story of my life, actually. So the partnership ended, and my parents actually bought another property just west of Airdrie as well. And in 1992, that's when my former farm was born. My mom's Shirley, and so my parents named it Shirley's Greenhouse. I'm no longer allowed to use that name, but I'm going to say it this one time because it is my history, it is my background, and it is who I was. I'm not that anymore. So they started Shirley's Greenhouse. It was a 26,000 square foot greenhouse. They grew long English cucumbers for the warehouse. And what that means is they grew a monocrop in their greenhouse, which was cucumbers, long English cucumbers. They picked them, they packaged them, they boxed them, and then they brought them in dozens to the warehouse. We had a bigger truck at that point, so we didn't ride in the back. But my dad would go on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays and ship to the warehouse. And back in the day, my parents were getting about $7 a dozen for long English cucumbers, which that paid their bills, and that paid their bills quite well. I grew up and we had a great living. Now it's agriculture and farming. So like we didn't go on fancy trips. We didn't, there's lots of things that we didn't do, but I always had a roof over my head. I always had food on my table. I always had clothes on my back. And yeah, my parents, they made us work too. Some of my earliest memories are out in the greenhouse. We used to fill sawdust bags before we grew in the Rockwell cubes and the cocoa fiber bags. We used to fill these sawdust bags full of sawdust. And so one of our jobs was to fill the sawdust bags and tie them up and then stack them up or put them in the greenhouse or whatever it might be. And yeah, like those are some of my earliest memories, was working on my parents' farm. Did I love it? Nope. Did I ever think when I was a teenager that I wanted to be in the greenhouse business? Nope. That's for sure not. Like, who wants to do what they did what they were made to do as a child? But yeah, life has a funny way of doing things to you. So I was 18 years old. I went to 3 years of Bible school. I went there to marry a man. None of the men looked at me. They were all a little afraid of me. I don't know. I can be too much sometimes. I came back from Bible school. I went to a little church outside of Carstairs, and I met my former husband. He was tall, dark, handsome, charming. He told me all about his parents' dairy farm. When I was a teenager, actually, I wanted to be a dairy farmer. My grandparents had a dairy farm. So I wanted to be a dairy farmer, not a greenhouse farmer. Anyway, so this man, he wooed me. He told me all about his dairy farm, all about how he had heifers and how he bred them and how he had his acreage then and all of the things. And I met and married him within a year. Too fast, hindsight. And we'll get more into that part of the story in another story, or another podcast. But yeah, met and married this man. We ended up selling his acreage and we moved out east of Didsbury, and we actually looked into getting into farming ourselves. And the choice we had at that point was dairy farm, which had $1 million price tag, or greenhouse, which had about a $750,000 price tag. My parents were in the greenhouse industry. His parents had been in the dairy industry. Hindsight 2020, we probably should have chose dairy, but we chose greenhouse. So we built this 36,000 square foot greenhouse, and we were going to do the same thing as my parents had. My parents had sold at that point. They sold their greenhouse, and my dad was doing sales and marketing, and we built ours, and we were going to do the same thing. Long English cucumbers to the warehouse. We were going to hopefully make a great living. The problem is bureaucracy. And if you've seen any of my online posts now, bureaucracy is killing farmers. I just actually watched a post here, or an old video from 2019 talking about bureaucracy and how it killed my farm, and bureaucracy killed my farm. But we'll get more into that later. I get a little squirrely, a little off track sometimes. So if you can just bear with me, I will always wrap around. So we built this greenhouse. I knew right from day one that it was going to be a problem. When I'm a very traditional woman, when I got married, I wanted to be the stay-at-home mom. I wanted to be the wife. I wanted to cook and clean and have the babies and do the wifely jobs. I am not a feminist. I wanted to serve my husband. And so when we were looking into which way to go for farming, I said to him, whatever you choose, I will support you. It's your choice. It's your farm. It's your business, and I will work for you. I will help. I'll work on the farm. I'm not afraid to work. But I did not want to run the farm. I wanted to be the wife and the mother. So we built the greenhouse. I was pregnant with our first child, and I knew there was going to be a problem when we were building it. We had hired a builder. My ex-husband was laid off from his job, and it was snowing one day, and the builder showed up. Well, one of the builders didn't show up, and the other guy did show up. And I said to my ex-husband at that point, I said, shouldn't you go outside and help? Shouldn't you be outside building this greenhouse? And he just looked at me and said, nope, that's why we hired someone. And that's the first clue that we were going to have problems. And those problems got bigger and bigger and bigger throughout our marriage and throughout our farm. When you're on a farm, you have to work. You have to give it your all. You have to, if you're a farmer out there and you're listening to this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When those cows need something, you do it. When the water freezes, you fix it. For me, later on when I took over the greenhouse and bought him out, my boiler was going off in the middle of the night, and I was Christmas Eve, 3 times in the night, Christmas Eve, I was outside fixing my boiler. You do what you got to do, and you have to work hard if you want to be a farmer. So I guess same thing if you're a homesteader right now and you think it's going to be easy. It is not easy. Be prepared to work harder than you've ever worked in your entire life. Again, little squirrely side thing, but it's pretty important that people know that farmers are some of the most hardworking people out there. No farmers, no food. So we built our greenhouse. We had our 36,000 square feet, no, 36,000 square feet of cucumbers. We were selling to the warehouse. We had bug problems. We had, management issues. We had lack of production. The first years were so hard, and we were running out of money, and we sold off assets to try and keep this farm going. And it was crazy. It was insane. And then my dad was trying to help us. He was trying to get the best pricing, but through the warehouse, the pricing isn't that great. And we had disaster strike, I think 2 years. 2 years after we built the greenhouse, my dad actually had a heart attack. We were downtown not downtown. We were in Calgary at a function. My dad was speaking to a small crowd. If you want to know who my dad was, just take one look at me and hear me talk. I am so much like my father. It's not even funny. He loved people more than he loved life himself. He was not shy. He was too much sometimes. And he was speaking to this group of people. The woman, it was her birthday party. Her son was going to surprise her. My dad was speaking, and boom, he passed out. And I was pregnant with my second baby, standing right there. And he passed out, and he came to, and then he passed out again and passed away. And that is probably one of the most traumatic, or there's a few traumatic things I've had happen in my life, and that is definitely one of them, is losing my father to a heart attack. And so we were then left on our own, and the stress of that, we no longer had our consultant. We were relying fully on my ex-husband to run the company. I was pregnant with my second baby. I was working. When I had that baby, I did payroll in the hospital. My ex-husband brought me payroll after my C-section, my second C-section, in the hospital, and I wrote up payroll. Again, I can't stress enough. When you're a farmer, you do what you gotta do. We told the doctor, actually, we said if the baby comes on a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday morning, my ex-husband actually wouldn't be there. He had to work on the farm. He had to wrap those cucumbers. That was more important than even me having a baby. The farm came first. Anyways, I digress. So we had this baby. My dad passes away. My ex-husband took on more of the responsibilities of my mom's now company, or my mom's former company. My dad was running a company. My ex-husband looked after the loose ends on that. I was having babies, and I had postpartum. I had postpartum really badly. My babies were left with babysitters, unfortunately. I always said to my ex-husband, I want to look after the kids, but that's not how it worked. I had the experience to prune the plants. I had the experience to know what needed to be done in the greenhouse. And bit by bit, I ended up taking on more of that workload, and more of the workload, and more of the workload. And my anxiety and stress was through the roof. My postpartum was insane. I struggled a lot with anxiety. I had to be hauled into the hospital for anxiety attacks because the anxiety was so bad. I was hyperventilating. And one thing that would happen when I got my anxiety attacks was I would stutter and slur my words. So I would sound like I was having a stroke. And now, see, I'm thinking about it, and it's coming. So I got to stop thinking about that. Anyways, I would sound like I was having a stroke. And one vivid memory I have is I had my children in the back seat of the vehicle. I was sent to run an errand or do something in town, and I had a panic attack. And I can remember, this is ugly and gross to admit, but I'm going to share it because hopefully my story can resonate with someone. I was screaming at my babies who were crying in the back seat of a truck. And I was so worked up over what I needed to do and what I had to do and what I wasn't doing in the house and what I wasn't doing for my children. I was so frustrated, and my stress level and the grief and the anxiety and everything. I ended up weeping, sitting in the front seat of my truck, weeping and having a panic attack. And I phoned my mom up, and she came, and I ended up curling up in the fetal position in the front seat of this truck. And I was brought into the hospital with stress and anxiety. I struggled with that over many years. I would even show up at farmers markets, and I would lose my speech, and I would just work through. Here I am sounding like I'm having a stroke at a farmer's market, still talking to customers, still showing up, still doing what I had to do because you can't quit. When you're a farmer, you can't quit. You have to do it. You cannot stop. And I didn't stop. I had another baby. With that baby, we started doing farmers markets. So I was at a farmer's market 3 weeks after a C-section, working a farmer's market with a tiny infant, with my baby at a farmer's market. It's crazy what farmers do. I can hear, you hear stories all the time of farm women who are in the combine or in the tractor or doing what they need to do with their babies. Do what you got to do. I knew a mom. She ended up having her baby at home because she was dealing with the chickens. Like, she did not stop the job and she waited too long and was working through, labor, and boom, there's the baby. Even my mom was pregnant with her sixth baby and was lifting heavy things in the greenhouse. She was 38 years old and the next day had a baby because, she pushed it too hard. Anyway, so we were selling cucumbers to the warehouse, not making ends meet. Things were not going well. And I started my first farmer's market. So I went to the old farmer's market and I brought cucumbers, and we had a handful of tomatoes, and I brought them to the farmer's market, and people raved over our tomatoes. And so the next year, what do? We pivoted, and I went to that farmer's market and another farmer's market, and we planted more tomatoes. And so we had cucumbers and tomatoes. And did we have peppers? I don't even remember. The next year we added peppers probably, and we added another farmer's market, and we added another farmer's market, cutting out the warehouse because pricing. When we were selling to the warehouse, it was $7 a dozen. The warehouse would sell to the grocery store for about $10 to $12 a dozen. The grocery store to the consumer for $18 to $24 a dozen. When we sold our produce at farmers markets, we were getting the $18 to $24 a dozen, not the $7 a dozen. And that is how we made our farm work. See, even at 36,000 square feet of greenhouse, we were small for the industry. We were tiny. We were just shy of 1 acre. And at that point, when we built, we should have built 2 or 3 acres, because that's what the warehouse, the pricing that was being offered from a warehouse could sustain on a bigger scale at 2 or 3 acres, not at 36,000 square feet. So fast forward, we're going to farmers markets, cucumbers, tomatoes, and peppers. We figured out I had my 3 babies. I stopped having babies because I wanted 8 babies. I had to stop because it just wasn't feasible. I was working too hard. And we're doing more and more markets. And I look outside our window and I was like, we have cropland out there. And if we're going to go to a farmer's market with cucumbers, tomatoes, and peppers, we may as well take potatoes, carrots, onions, beets. And so we planted our first 1 acre of garden. And I can remember my ex-husband said that he was talking to his mom inside the house and they were looking out the window at the garden, 1 acre. And my ex-mother-in-law, who I love, she said, wow, that's a lot of garden. What are you going to do if it doesn't work? And my ex-husband, who knew me well at this point, said, what is she, meaning me, going to do next year if it does work? And, we went from 1 acre to 3 acres to 6 acres to 10 acres to 15 acres of garden. And I sold it all at farmers markets. We just kept picking up more and more and more farmers markets and did less and less wholesale. We were still selling at that point to some local grocery stores. And again, I was just watching the video this morning. I have been calling out our food system since 2019. Now, we were selling to the grocery stores, corporation grocery stores, and they asked for Canada GAP certification. Now, what Canada GAP certification is, it's bureaucratic, pardon my language, bullshit paperwork for a small producer anyway, to be able to sell to a warehouse. So, and to a grocery store, to deem your produce or whatever your farm item is safe. And the problem I have with that bureaucracy, and now you keep piling on more and more bureaucracy, the problem I have with that bureaucracy is that it would cost my farm about $7,000 to do at that point, to sell $20,000 worth of wholesale, so less money, wholesale product to these grocery stores. And I said, no, I'm not doing it. We're not doing it. We can't afford to do it. It doesn't make financial sense to do it. It ain't happening. And so we pulled out of grocery stores in 2019 and sold predominantly and only, mostly only at farmers markets and direct to consumer. Because again, that's how we could make a living because we were a small farm. At 36,000 square feet of greenhouse and 15 acres of garden, we were a small farm. We were small. In my video, it says a little fish in a big pond. And yeah, so we pulled out of the grocery stores. We were selling at farmers markets and things were going okay. We were doing more and more farmers markets. At one point, we were doing a big farmers market in Calgary, and that farmers market burnt down. Yeah, it's crazy the hardships that you go through as a farmer. We did lose a crop one year to herbicide in the water. Tomatoes are extremely susceptible to herbicide, and the herbicide came in through the ditches. It was June. We used dugout water in the greenhouse because the plants don't like well water, and so we were drawing our water out of our dugout. And yeah, our plants, all of a sudden the leaves started curling up and they died, and it was herbicide in the water. So we spent, thousands of dollars again and got a charcoal filter. What else happened? Oh, we got a disease. We got a crazy disease in the greenhouse one year and we had to pull our crop. That was really rough. One of the first years I can remember thrip. We had thrip in the greenhouse so bad. Thrip are bugs. There's a misconception. People think, oh, you're in a greenhouse, you don't have bugs. And I say, no, like it's even worse. Aphids were horrendous. Thrip were really bad that one of those first years. And what they do is they would bite a cucumber. So you'd have a cucumber and they would bite in the middle and that cucumber would curl. So what does the grocery store want? Have you ever seen a curled cucumber in the grocery store? Not very often. You see perfect straight ones. That's what people want, is the pretty cucumbers. So the curled cucumbers, we would actually pick them off and sell them at like pennies on the dollar just to make ends meet, or just to get rid of them. Sorry, but we weren't making ends meet. Anyways, so yeah, fast forward to me being what happened in our marriage then, and what happened on our farm was we figured out that my ex-husband, his strength was not necessarily working, and he would fix things. Don't get me wrong. He fixed things. When something broke, that man could fix things better than anyone else. I can't fix things. He did. But we figured out the business side, the tic-tac-tician, the, figuring out the business, making decisions, sales was my thing. Yeah, that was my thing. And so we ended up switching roles. And so my ex-husband ended up being in our house more as the house mom. And I ended up being this strong, independent bulldozer in business. And for many years, our farm actually worked well. Were we rich? No, we were farmers. But did we make a great living? Yeah. Did my kids have food on their table? Yeah. Did they have their mom? No. I worked too much. That's some of my regrets, is that I worked too much and I didn't spend enough time with my kids. But I had to do what I had to do, and I can't go back, and I can't just wallow in that self-pity. Anyways, so I got really strong in our business. I was growing our business. Our business was thriving. Because of the farmers market situation, I ended up opening a store in the town of Olds called, a market store, and I was selling produce directly through this store. I was also taking in product from other vendors, other small businesses, and selling them through my store. And I knew that we need to make our food system local. The local food system is how we're going to survive. The big system is trouble. Again, since 2019, I've known, in the name of health and safety or bureaucracy, I knew that the government would team up with corporations, and it's probably climate change now or whatever. There's Bill C-93 right now that's being passed, and it's pandemic preparedness. And what it's going to do, it's going to hurt farmers, and it's going to put even more red tape on farmers. And not just the vegetable farmers, but like beef farmers and chicken farmers and dairy farmers. And we need to take control of our food system back, because if we only end up with these big farms, and I've been calling this out for years, that food system is so easy to control, and we're going to get dictated, this is what you get to eat and this is what you not get to eat. So that's why I'm getting into what I'm getting into, is helping people grow food in their backyard so that they can take their food system and their food sovereignty back into their own hands. Anyway, so as our marriage went on, as we switched roles, it wasn't healthy for our marriage. And our marriage actually deteriorated to the point that we were hardly on speaking terms. I spoke of my slurring of my words many times. I went to counseling by myself for a whole summer. I got told that it was a waste of time and money. The next summer, I actually decided, it was one of the last summers that we were together. So that was 7 years ago. I decided I wasn't going to care about my marriage. I was not going to put any of my heart and soul effort into my marriage. And I'll tell you what happened that whole summer. I didn't slur or stutter my words once. And I found that very telling, that here I was thriving. I was thriving in business. I was thriving in the marketplace. I was thriving in sales. I was thriving in everything I was doing. And I didn't stutter or slur my words or have stress or have anxiety until the very end of the summer, when we had a big fight, and boom, my stuttering and slurring of my words came back just like that. And I was like, that's interesting. So that was the first process of, hey, we need to change something within our marriage to keep going. And I'd like to talk to you about my customers. And so part of having a farm was direct marketing. And I myself went to farmers markets. I shook the hands of people that bought my produce. And the babies, I can remember several young children who the moms would bring them, and the kids would run up and they'd want my tomatoes, candy tomatoes. The tomatoes that we grew were the best. They were sweet and they were like candy. I had moms tell me that their kids wouldn't eat vegetables, but they would only eat my vegetables. That is a little boost for your ego. And honestly, it was such a relationship. One thing I know is I was nothing. I was nothing without my team. And the people on my team were the people that worked for me and worked and did the physical work on the farm. And the people on my team also were my customers. And you want to know what I miss the most about not having my farm right now? My customers and those relationships. I watched children grow up. I shook the hands of people that bought my produce. I was very passionate too about quality and the teamwork that it took to have this relationship. I always told my staff, if anyone ever complained about our produce, replace it just like that. So sometimes you'd have a customer come up and they'd say, I don't really want to tell you, but we had these bad tomatoes. And I'd say, here you go. Here's a free bag. We'll replace it up. No questions asked. I had very high standards for my produce. Now, produce in a warehouse is, in a grocery store is at least a week old. Now, my standards for my produce, if it was a week old, it was grocery store quality, not my quality. And so we food banked it, or we, sent it to different places. I guess I want to get into that too. Having a farm, it was pretty cool because I was able to open my hands. I held my farm like this. I have a bigger faith, and my farm didn't belong to me. My farm belonged to the Lord. And when I had extra produce, I actually was able to give it to food banks. I was able to give it to the pregnancy care center. I traded vegetables. I had one woman, this is what I'm going to miss too about not having a farm. And this is why I don't understand parts of why I don't have a farm and parts of why I'm on this next journey. I don't understand, because I was able to trade. There was one woman, she'd come every week to a farmer's market on Sunday, and she would bring me her bag full of food bank items. Well, what's in a food bank? Kraft dinner and toothpaste. So she would bring her bag that she could offer me of toothpaste and Kraft Dinner and rice. And I would trade that bag of food, quote unquote food, for a big bag of fresh vegetables for her family. And, that's the thing. Like, it was about relationship. My farm was about relationship. It wasn't about the dollars and cents. I needed the dollars and cents to keep it going, but it wasn't about that. That's not what drove me. The money didn't drive me. The money on my farm didn't drive me. It was the people that drove me. I love people more than I love life itself. And I still love people more than I love life itself. And so, yeah, that's what drove me on my farm, is the relationships and the people and the teamwork and the camaraderie and the what we could do with food. At the pregnancy care center, I got an email back and they said they had a mom come in, and that mom hadn't ate that day because she couldn't afford food. So, and she couldn't afford fresh food. So the baby, it was not a small baby, but small child baby, had never had a tomato before because the mom couldn't afford tomatoes. How wrong is our food system when you can afford the fucking Kraft Dinner, but you can't afford the tomato, or you can't afford the beef? That's real food. Like, anyways, I digress. So this mom came in, she was offered a tomato sandwich, and that baby was able to eat tomatoes for the first time because the tomatoes that I was able to, not of my own hand, but because of something bigger, give to that pregnancy care center. And yeah, like, it's stories like that. It's the things like that I miss the most. So again, share my podcast, put it out there. We'll see where this goes next, because we need to change our food system. We need to change our food system so bad. And we need to make it a local food system. Buy from your local farmer. Buy from your beef from your local farmer. Skip the warehouse. Skip the grocery store. Skip the corporations. Skip the bureaucracy and go directly to the farmers to get your food. We, the people, need to change our food system. Yeah, I can't preach it enough. I can't say it enough. I can't, scream it enough that if we don't start taking our food system into our own hands, it's going to be a dictatorship. And I'm not trying to put the fear in you. I've just seen it. I grew up in the industry, and I've seen it happening right before my eyes, and I'm calling it out. Let's get into the pandemic, actually. When the pandemic hit, I had people, we remember the toilet paper wars, right? So we had these toilet paper wars in the pandemic, and I had people honestly phoning me up. Dawn, you have food, right? And I'd say, yes, I have food. And they would feel floods of relief. I'll never forget the one, it was over a year into the pandemic. And people were worried because we had these remember the QR codes and the paperwork, and you can do this and you can't do that. And if you're the unvaccinated, you're of the unclean, and, and people were worried about what they were going to do and where all of it was headed, and rightfully so. Now, if you're vaccinated, great. Like, if that was your choice and that's what you wanted to do, great. Like, your body, your choice. But there was people in our society that really felt ostracized. They were having to choose between the vaccine and their jobs, which is food, really, because you can't buy food without a job. And it was some scary times if you made the choice that went against the narrative, went against the grain, went against what you were being told you had to do to be a good person. I'm here to tell you today, I'm not vaccinated. I was a bad person. Yeah, someone tried talking me into it. And, she made some really great points. I love her. I miss her, actually. She's one of my customers. And she said, I can give you a hug if you get vaccinated, and I can't if you don't. The manipulation behind that, not her fault. It's the narrative's fault. I do not blame this woman one bit. And if you ever listen to this, I still love you. I still care about you. I care about your kids. Your baby was one of the first ones that ate my tomatoes. So, but the manipulation behind that. And she came up to me a couple weeks later and said, did you get vaccinated? And I was thinking about it. I honestly was. And then our government said, you're a good person if you get vaccinated, and we're going to pay you $100 to get vaccinated. And I'm like, fuck you. If you have to pay me to be a good person, and I'm not doing it out of my own whatever, heart and soul, I'm not doing it. And why are you having to pay people to be good people? This is crazy and ridiculous. And I started questioning everything after that. Anyways, again, squirrel, I digress. This one woman came up to me a year later at a farmer's market. She brought her mom, and with tears in her eyes, she said, "Are you a farmer?" And I said, "Yes, I'm a farmer. I have a farm. I grow food." And she said, "I'm so worried about my mom. If something gets worse, where will she go? What will she do?" This woman was from Vancouver Island. She knew her farmers on the island, but her mom was in Calgary, the city of Calgary, and didn't know farmers. And I said to her, I said, "Here's my personal cell number." I gave it out all the time. "Here's my personal cell phone number. Get your mom to phone me. Get her to come out to my farm. And if shit really hits the fan," which thankfully it didn't at that point, I said, "You come to my farm." And that's the thing. I felt so responsible for people and their food. It was a great responsibility. And I took it so seriously, providing food for people. And there was many, many people like her. They were worried about their food. And I'd say, "Come to my farm. We'll figure it out. Come to my farm. We'll figure it out. Come to my farm. I'll feed you. We'll work at it together. I have assets and in food, and I had chickens, and I had, I could feed and take care of people." And I took that responsibility very greatly and very, very highly. So again, I'm not sure what the plan is, Lord, where the next steps are, but I do know this: in selling my farm, my tongue is not tamed. I have a wild tongue. I speak my mind, and I am not afraid to call out bureaucracy and bullshit, just like I did in 2019, just like I'm still doing today. Bureaucracy and bullshit. We need to protect our farmers, and we need to protect our food system. Anyways, we get through a few years. My ex-husband, we're separated. Things are not going well. We didn't end up working it out, and I ended up buying him out of the farm. I'll never forget. He came to me and said, "Dawn, I want out." And I said, and I'd been picking up drop balls behind this man for many years. And I said, this is what I always said to him. I said, "Okay, I'll figure it out. And if you're a farmer, you understand exactly what I'm saying. I'll figure it out." And you do. You figure it out. When there's a problem, you figure it out. And I bought him out. I bought him out of the farm, picked up the last and heaviest drop ball. I had to figure out all of the maintenance that he was doing. I had to figure all that out, and I bought him out of the farm. I made it 3 more years. The bureaucracy was getting harder and harder and harder at farmers markets. Farmers, quote unquote, markets. And things over the last couple of years have gotten tighter and tighter and tighter. You all know it that you're listening. Food prices have gone up. Natural gas prices have gone up. My biggest natural gas bill was $12,000 for a month. And that wasn't even my biggest bill. The labor bill on my farm was between $300,000 and $500,000 a year. People don't realize this, but the bills are huge on farms. It costs so much to produce food, especially when you're manually picking it and manually pruning it and manually weeding it. Like, it's insane what it costs to grow food. So things got harder and harder and harder. The last year that I was in business, I was short $100,000, which, when I was doing $1 million gross sales in a year, just on the farm, that was not the stores and everything. I was short $100,000, which really isn't very much. And I had someone ask me, actually, even this morning, "Why did you have to sell your farm?" Well, that last year that I was in business, I was $100,000 short. $30,000 of that was because my mortgage payments went up because of interest rates. Thanks, Justin Trudeau, who has screwed over Canada. Sorry, this is politics, but that man's done nothing for our country. The carbon tax has caused everything to go up in price, including my vegetables. I raised my prices. And a local vendor, owed me $16,000. And then I was competing at quote unquote farmers markets against produce that was being bought and sold by many different vendors, not just one. Many different vendors were at farmers markets with produce that was being bought and sold from the biggest warehouse in the province. That produce was meant for grocery stores. It was not meant for farmers markets. And being sold as a guise or a ruse or a liar, liar, pants on fire at a farmer's market as farm direct. And it was being sold for less money than what I could grow and sell the produce for. And so I spoke till I was blue in the face. I had fights with other vendors. I talked. I cried. But no one would listen to me. I spoke to customers. I grew this produce on my table, but if you were the first time at a farmer's market and you went to a booth that said something farms or farmer something, you think that you're getting farm produce and you're not. And so that's wrong. Produce at farmers markets, the majority of it, aside from a few vendors, a few farmers, is being bought and sold from big warehouses or big whatever, and adding into this bureaucratic bullshit that is going to hurt our food system and not help it. And that's the thing. People are blind. I had been calling it out that in the name of bureaucracy, I'm going to lose my farm. I'm going to have to sell my farm. And finally, I was $100,000 short. If even those vendors, even if they would have taken just one item of tomatoes and let the farmer sell the tomatoes at the farmer's market, I probably would still be farming right now. That's how close the race was. That's how tight it was. That's how, So again, I'm going to call a spade a spade. Bureaucracy killed my farm. First of all, in the warehouse. Second of all, at the grocery store level. Third of all, at a farmer's market. So bullshit. If we don't protect our farms, we're not going to have a farm left. Anyways, rant over yet again. I will rant till the day I can't speak. When I sold my farm, actually, I got cut off of and kicked off of some different farmers market pages because my tongue got louder and my voice got bigger because I had no longer anything to lose. I didn't have my farm anymore. I didn't have to watch my P's and Q's because I'm not allowed to sell vegetables in the province of Alberta for grow and sell vegetables for 5 years. Like, I'm out of the race. I'm out of the food system. I'm no longer the competition. Congratulations, people. You got the competition out. Right up to the bureaucratic, whatever. Anyways, I'm ranting now. So I sold my farm. The last few months on my farm were pretty traumatic. I got really sad. I did a post on my former farm page, and that post hit 1 million views. I talked about the carbon tax. I talked about the bureaucracy. I talked, and people are listening. They need to listen. So my last few months on the farm were really tough. I wept a lot. I cried a lot. I grieved a lot. See, selling my farm, when you're a farmer, it's your entire identity. It's who you are as a person. Again, go back to the story that I wrote when I was 5 years old. I chose my career even as a small child. I knew that I would be a farmer. When I sold my farm, I bought a hat actually, and it said "in my blood" because it's true. When you're a farmer, it's not a job. It's 27 or 20. No, sorry. When you're a farmer, it's 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You're on call all the time. You don't get a break. You don't stop. You do the work. Again, if you're a farmer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Even if you're a homesteader, you know what I'm talking about. You're on call, and it's just fundamentally who you are. It's your entire identity. And I identified as a farmer. I still feel like I'm a farmer, even though I don't have a farm. I'm a lost farmer without a farm. I will get a farm back again someday. It just might not be today. It might not be tomorrow, but I will get a farm one day. So as I'm selling my farm, as the chips are falling, as I'm no longer $1 million in debt. 1 year ago today, I was $1 million in debt. That's farming and agriculture. You're in debt till you can't even see anymore. $1 million. I sold the farm, paid off my debt, bought a little house, just living a simple life. I got my first job in 20 years. That was quite the experience. I also got fired from that job because I call out bureaucracy, and when there's injustice, I call it out. I'm not shy about that. So, so I'm looking at what's my next step? What's my next career path? And I took an online business course, and I feel called. I'm coming off that mountain of farming, feeling like, why did I have to leave that? I know what it was able to do for people. I know the food that I was able to donate or give or sell, or the relationships that I built and created. So why? Why am I selling this farm? And what I can come up with is I have all this knowledge. I know how to grow vegetables. I know how to feed people. I know that our food system is in trouble. I know that we should all be growing food in our backyard. You want to know how we can fix our food system? Grow vegetables in our backyard. If every person in town, in the country, wherever they are, had a few chickens and grew some vegetables, we would not have food shortages and hunger here in the country of Canada. And I fully believe that in every country, if people would just go to that local food system instead of relying on this big bureaucratic, system, feed me, that's what's going to solve our world hunger problems. I'm not saying we don't need big farmers. We do. We need the beef farmers. We need the grain farmers. We need all the food, but I can teach people, that's where I'm at right now. I can teach people how to grow food in their backyard. And so that's where I'm headed. I had clients this past year. We got food production out of their backyards and they were thrilled. I saved them time on weeding. I saved them time on watering. I saved them time on, knowing which crops to plant and which crops produce and which crops don't. It's so important. So I feel like my next steps is to teach people how to grow food, how to, survive this next system, or where our food system is headed. And if we all had, I was in Kelowna actually at a retreat, and there was a huge zucchini sitting on an electrical box right in the middle of the city. And I thought that is what we need more of. If we would all just grow gardens and put our extra food out for someone else who doesn't have food, no one would be hungry. And so I can teach people how to do that. We've lost that. How many of you, as you're listening to this, your grandma had a garden, or your auntie had a garden, or your uncle had a farm? We're getting so far removed from our food system that we're losing the ability and the know-how on how to make food ourselves. And so we need to tighten up those strings. We need to, grow food ourselves and feed ourselves. And so, yeah, it's all about helping others. And if we all can do what we can do to help others, that's where we need to be in society. It's not about left. It's not about right. It's not about fighting each other. It's not about I'm vaxxed and you're not, and you're this and I'm not. It's about working together as communities, building more relationships. Again, we've got all this social media stuff. We're so far removed from, we get our groceries online. We're so far removed from people that we need to build people back into our lives. And I think that starts with food. I think that starts with our soil. I think that starts with, our food system and shaking the hands with people that feed us, Without farmers, we don't have food, just like my hat says. And yeah. So my biggest fear moving off my farm was actually, how am I going to feed my kids? And so thankfully I landed in the country. This year I had some small garden boxes. I built myself a little greenhouse. Let me tell you how much fun gardening is. This year I gardened for fun and not for people would always say, oh, I want to work for you, Dawn. I like gardening. And I'm like, well, do you like gardening on steroids? Do you like picking weeds for 8 hours and plus 30 heat with, you can have a break, but it's hours and hours on end. Whereas, on my little place this year, it was just fun. I have a few chickens. I have a mini pig. She's just a pet. I could eat her if I had to, because I still am a farm girl at heart, but she's just a pet. And yeah, I have food for my family. I was so worried about, if shit really hit the fan, I was so afraid to go from being the farmer who could take care of people to being on my own and realizing, how can I feed my kids? I always had my farm. I knew I could feed my kids. Without my farm, I'm like, what am I going to feed my kids? And yeah, so this way I'm able to grow produce and just for us and for my own family, and eggs for my own family, and it's just fun. So yeah, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day, and if you teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. And so yeah, if you need help growing a garden, if you want to learn more about how to grow your own food, even if you live in an apartment someplace, you can grow a lot of food just even on your balcony. We can choose which crops to grow. We can, get those skills. Take your food into your own hands. Can you imagine if you didn't have to buy vegetables for a summer? How much money you would save, right? Like, that's the thing. A package of seeds is, $2, and that will turn into, lots and lots and lots of food that you wouldn't have to buy in a grocery store. Yeah, so that's my story in a nutshell. There's more to it. Reach out on my social media, Dawn's Dirt, if you've got questions or comments or things you want to hear about or more topics you want me to talk about. Or yeah, I'm looking forward to this next journey and seeing where the Lord takes me next. And yeah, thanks so much for listening, and share this with your friends. No farmers, no food. Food's so important to people. It sustains life. It's who we are. Thank you.